All right, welcome everyone to the February Ascend webinar. This month we have Ann Peterson, who is the Director of SBIR Outreach Program at Montana State University, and she's going to be talking to us today about SBIR and STTR funding for early stage biomedical technologies. We're going to have Ann go through a presentation, and we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. Please send them through the chat feature and I'll read them out loud. Thank you, Ann.
Perfect. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I'm happy to have a chance to talk with so many of you who are in the biotech field and planning to bring innovations to market in the future. This conversation is really going to be about a specific type of federal funding that you may want to consider as you're exploring options for funding what can amount to pretty costly research. So we'll go ahead and start. And I wanted to, before we really get started, I am in Montana. I take care of the statewide SBIR outreach for the state of Montana. But many of you are joining us from our member states with the Ascend program, from New Mexico, Nevada, Hawaii, Alaska, Idaho. And if you are lucky enough to be living in one of those states, you are also lucky enough to be supported by really outstanding SBIR support organizations. So if you're in Montana, I'm your person. If you're in any of the other states, I can make sure that Hallie has some information on some really great point people who you can speak to if you want to explore the type of funding that we're going to be talking about a little bit more, as well as get clued into some additional resources that may be available to you. Most of us on this list have also received another little uptick of a certain type of funding called the Federal and State Technology Partnership funding from the Small Business Administration, specifically to support innovative entrepreneurs who are trying to investigate how to bring these technologies to market. Now I'm going to go ahead here. All of our organizations, these are the types of areas that we will help support you. That's with outreach, training events, webinars, face-to-face meetings as you need them, consulting. As you're getting ready to explore these types of funding opportunities, we can help you to navigate the process. We also have consultants amongst ourselves as well as on our teams that can provide you with expert proposal reviews to make sure that when you submit a proposal for this type of funding, you're putting your best proposal in front of the reviewers. Some of us may have some financial assistance to help you along the way, and we all collaborate, both with our regional economic development organizations, our tech transfer offices at the universities that are in our states, as well as amongst ourselves. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll make sure I put you in touch with folks that are in your respective state. So let's go ahead. Let me start this conversation by asking you a question. Are you a risk taker? If you are, let me ask you this. Let's just suppose I have a technology. I can't really say I have a technology yet. I have an idea of a technology. It's kind of crazy. I'm not even sure if it's feasible yet. But if it is, if it's feasible, if I can create a product out of it, it might just change a lot of lives. It might impact a new way of cancer treatment. It might save millions of lives. Might also form the basis of a pretty scalable business for myself. But like I said, I'm not even sure it will work. So I'm going to ask those crazy folks out there, who is crazy enough to give me a few $1 million? Just a few million. I'm not sure I can do this, but give me a few $1 million and I'll tell you if maybe I can build this product. Any takers? Okay. How about $250,000, just $250,000? What I'll do with that is I'll run some tests, feasibility tests. I'll give you a report at the end of it. Takers? No one crazy enough to do this? Let me tell you who might just be crazy enough to do this. The federal government. The United States government is in the business of ensuring that our technology development, technological innovations are second to none globally. They're very, very focused on ensuring that America has the best and brightest working on really, really important unmet needs. Unmet needs in cancer research, unmet needs in space exploration, unmet needs in agriculture, a whole host of other areas. We'll talk specifically about some options with biomedical research today, but this is the type of funding that we're talking about. This is funding for very early stage technology that has the potential to have a huge, broad impact, to meet unmet needs, and also has the potential to create a business, a scalable business for the producer of that or a licensee of that technology so that it can benefit the nation as a whole, both economically as well as societally. So what is the name of this special kind of funding? It's Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer. They're really sister programs. Throughout this conversation, I might just say SBIR, but we're going to talk a lot about STTR. That's the technology transfer version of SBIR. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences of those, but why this is important to both our US economy, but also an opportunity for you to explore as you're looking at how you can actually bring your ideas for these innovations that are going to offer some great advantages, how you can best leverage this type of funding to bring your technology to market. This is not chump change either. This is over $3.5 billion is invested annually currently by all of the agencies that participate in this program. And I'm going to take you through just a few different examples. You may be familiar with one of these devices. You may have one in your pocket. Nobody here has a cell phone, a mobile phone, a smartphone that does not contain technologies that either in part or in whole were funded with SBIR funding. Wi-Fi on a chip, some of the touchscreen technologies, some of the networking capabilities were all funded with SBIR technologies. Another example, you may have seen some of these really tearjerker videos of these glasses. These are the Enchroma glasses to allow people who are colorblind to see a broad spectrum of different colors. This company, Enchroma, and this technology was able to launch and expand by leveraging Small Business Innovation Research funding. Another example. You might be familiar with this type of procedure. It is LASIK. LASIK was actually funded originally by the Air Force. The Air Force had a need to ensure that its pilots had the best eyesight possible. And this was originally funded by Department of Defense funding through the SBIR program. You might think of it, naturally, it's the National Institutes of Health. Not so. Department of Defense funding funded this type of procedure. And finally, this is just more of a close to home example. Not sure if anybody knows what these are, but they're surgical sponges. And in particular, these are sponges created or currently created and developed or offered by a company called Stryker. Stryker acquired this technology from a small firm that originally was based in Louisiana, that was started with a husband and wife team. The wife was a nurse, the husband was a financial analyst, and she had this idea of trying to reduce the number of sponges that were lost inside of a patient after surgery. And she came up with the idea of putting an RFID, a radio frequency ID chip, somehow in that sponge, but you wanted to test, was this feasible? Could this really work? Yeah, you could put something in the sponge, but would that be feasible in a true application with surgery and things like that? They received just a first round of funding. We'll talk about the different types of funding, phases of funding with SBIR. And then they went on. They took no more small business innovation research money because it was such a needed application that they were eventually acquired by Stryker. What's interesting also about this is that the daughter of that company or that couple grew up in Montana. They had eventually moved to Montana, and she came to work for me as an intern. And funny enough, she knew nothing about SBIR. A few weeks after she started working with me, she went home to Kalispell, was talking with her parents about the cool stuff she was doing and what we were doing. And they said, oh, we have one of those. We had one of those. So it's just kind of a little small world story, but also an example of just the breadth of types of technologies that can be funded with a small business innovation research. Here, again, I'm going to get into some of the details, some of the things from a very high level about the SBIR programs for you all to consider. And again, we can go way down deep in the woods. We'll have some time for some questions, but again, I will defer you back to your own kind of regional support agency, local agencies. But here are some things that you may want to consider. When is this good for? What are some of the good qualities about SBIR? Why should I be considering it? When should I be considering it? A couple of the advantages of SBIR is that it is seed funding that typically a venture capitalist or an angel is not going to be interested in. It's coming at a stage where you just have an idea. You don't have any customers because you haven't even built your product yet. You're not even sure if it's feasible in many cases. So this is very, very early stage technology funding. It's typically going to be coming to you after that basic research timeframe. So you've received maybe some academic funding, but now you're looking to spin out a company, or you're partnering with a commercial entity outside of your university to collaborate on how can we take this lab, this bench technology, and really get it to the point where you have a marketable product. So that's kind of where this is coming. It's really at that research, post-basic research, into the phase of true R&D. This is non-dilutive capital. And what that means is the government does not take an equity stake in your business. Venture capitalists or angels are going to require some type of note or some type of equity stake. You have intellectual property protections on the data that's created out of this under a grant or contract under the SBIR programs. And it also does validate for down the road when you have scaled your business enough that you need a little bit more funding, maybe some equity capital, to demonstrate that you have proven technology that a government agency has funded. That certainly de-risks for venture capitalists down the road. And I mentioned the last bullet here is direct follow-on phase 3. Again, I'll talk about the phases here. Phase 3 doesn't really mean SBIR. It really means that point where you've entered an acquisition program, or you have an opportunity to sell back into the government. Because this process is so competitive, if you have an opportunity to sell your technology back into a government agency, you can assert your rights that you've already gone through competition. So you may have the opportunity, if they are looking for your specific technology, to have a sole source contract. They don't have to go to competition again. You've already done it through this program. All right, let's go ahead and look at a couple of things. Who does this? Who participates in the SBIR program? It is not every single agency. It is the Department of Defense, the Department of Health and Human Services, and NIH and the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Energy, the National Science Foundation, NASA, USDA, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, NOAA, NIST, and EPA. The top 5 of those, Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, Energy, NSF, and NASA also participate in that sister program I talked about, STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer. So keep that in mind. Not every agency, only the top 5 participate in that technology transfer. Doesn't mean that you can't partner with the university, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. On this slide also you can see how this money is divvied up. That $3.5 billion I talk about half of it's Department of Defense. About a third of it is National Institutes of Health and Health and Human Services. And then the rest of the agencies get to share the rest of the pie. Let's look at if this could be right for you. Is this a type of funding that could fit your technology, your culture, what you want to do with either your career, a company, spinning out a company, partnering with companies, what type of technology you have? First of all, you have to be a small business. If you are still at the university, you can partner with organizations, companies that apply for small business innovation research or small business technology transfer, but you cannot be the applicant. The applicant is always a small business. That business has to be under 500 employees. That's not a hard mark to meet in a lot of our rural states. There's some different, depending on the agency, there's some different requirements in terms of how much or if you can have any venture capital involved at all. But in general, you have to be a for-profit small business, very small business, meaning under 500 employees, and US-based, I should emphasize as well. What's the innovation part? Remember, small business innovation research. Innovation means you're bringing something novel to the field. You're improving the scientific research in your field with something that really hasn't been done, hasn't been tested, or it's a vast improvement over some of the basic research that's already been out there. It's game changing. It has that ability to maybe disrupt a whole industry. It's high risk. And what I mean by high risk is without this type of funding, it would go unproven. It needs that type of money to test it out. This is not something that's easily tested and confirmed with $5,000. If you can do that for $5,000, go do it. Avoid this money. Not that it's bad, just you don't need this money. Go prove it, take your thing to market. But generally, with a lot of the technologies that you all are working on, it's going to take hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. That's the type of funding. That's the type of need that the government wants to meet because they want that technology innovation. But the private sector is not ponying up the money at this early stage for that type of technology development. You also have to have a technology that, if you built it, you could actually sell it. You could license it, or someone could, your licensee, your partners, your channel partners. There has to be a need that someone will pay for the benefit of using that product, that service that you develop. And you also have to have something that's pretty scalable. They don't want to do a lot of one-off R&D. That's what kind of basic research is for. They do fund a lot of basic research, but they actually want to see this go somewhere. They want to see this also benefit the national economy as best as they can. It's high risk. Not everybody does go that way, but that is the intent. Research. Let's talk a little bit about the research. What are they looking for in research? What are some of the components that they're considering when you're describing the research they're going to do for these types of proposals or this type of funding? It has to have intellectual merit. That's probably something you're pretty familiar with any of your proposals. They want to look at the intellectual merit. They want to know that this is going to have some type of impact. If they fund you for the work that you're proposing to do, the goal is that it's going to move the needle. It's going to change the technology landscape. It's going to improve the scientific research and the ability to develop really improved patient care, improve opportunities for whatever your technology addresses. And they also want to look at your team, not just the research team, but of course, they want to see that you have a competent team to carry out the work that you propose to do. But they also want to see, do they also have a team that, if they're successful, they can take this at least to the early stages of market. They can have good conversations with potential licensees, potential partners, or direct sales. It's always important when you're thinking about this type of proposal that you're focusing on your first customer, which is the agency that you're writing the proposal for. So write for your reviewers. Understand what they look for in a successful proposal. Answer the questions that they ask when they release their funding opportunity announcement. And my little picture is in the way of this, but it is something to the effect we seek articulated ideas and projects, well-articulated ideas and projects that are responsive to the needs of each of our respective topics. So I've alluded to this before. I've talked about the phases that are involved with small business innovation research. It is a 3-phase program. That phase 1, as I talked about at the beginning, that's just to prove that what you have actually is feasible. One, it can be done. Maybe you're using technology that has a little bit of maturity, but you want to address, is it feasible for the intended application? So RFIDs, for example, that's not proven, or that was not novel technology back when my intern's parents wrote their SBIR proposal, but the application was a novel approach, and they wanted to confirm, is this going to be feasible for the application that we intended? Can they actually address certain needs with losing sponges in surgical rooms? Feasibility studies typically are 6 to 12 months, and they're up to $250,000, about 252, 256 or so. There is some leeway different with some of the different agencies, but that's basically what you'll want to think about. Some of the other agencies have much smaller, maybe $100,000 for their phase 1 feasibility study. The next phase, though, if you have successfully proven feasibility of your intended technology development, you would submit a phase 2 proposal. That's where you're going to have a much bigger amount of money to work with, and that's also the time when you're actually going to have the goal of, at the end of that phase 2 type of funding, you've reached a certain level of maturity, perhaps a prototype. Maybe you're getting to much closer to running clinical trials. You may not be able to get to all the way, but you want to have a significant amount advancement in the research and development of your product. But I want to also caution you here that phase 2 proposal, while a lot more money, you still want to have a very specific, well-defined project, a very specific research strategy, very specific aims. When we're talking about NIH, and I'm going to, I hope many of you are familiar with the phrase specific aims. If you've received any basic research funding from NIH, they'll use the same type of model. That's for National Institutes of Health. Other agencies will also fund biomedical research, National Science Foundation, the Department of Defense. In fact, every single agency may be a potential target, depending on your application, for a health-related SBIR proposal. So keep that in mind. We'll talk a little bit about that in the future And you could also work with your local support agency to explore, are there other agencies that I should be looking at? But I probably will default to NIH today and Department of Defense and National Science Foundation, because they've just opened up some additional funding types of topic areas that may be interesting to some of you. The final phase, though, I want to wrap this up. The final phase, we call phase 3, but it has nothing to do with SBIR fund money. It is not SBIR money, but it is that confirmation that your technology development with your phase 1 and your phase 2, maybe some additional supplemental phase 2 funding, it's warranting additional research and development funds from any agency that is not SBIR funding, but just additional research and development funding, or you've actually gone on to achieve some type of sales, some types of licensing, some other type of matching funds or investment funds. Those can be qualified as that phase 3 of commercialization of this technology. And that's the goal. That's the goal. You want to get to the point where you can stand on your own 2 feet with that technology and take that company to success. I mentioned on the bottom of this slide a sampling of some of the other support that the agencies offer for SBIR applicants, because their intention is to make you successful. They will offer you support before you prepare your application, during your application preparation. All of the program officers are typically very, very helpful when they are allowed to talk with you as you're preparing your proposal. And then some of the organizations have very good opportunities to learn more about marketing your technologies with types of programs like I-Corps, Innovation Corps, that was originally started with NSF. But National Institutes of Health has adopted an I-Corps type of program. And that's really where you're going to go out to learn much more about your customer and do some customer discovery. And I'm going to stop right there. I love that type of conversation, but I know that you've had other webinar series on this, so I definitely invite you to take advantage of the other webinars that are available in this series on customer discovery and identifying your market. And anybody in Montana, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Let's look at the difference between SBIR and STTR. Remember, I said that they're sister programs. And these sister programs were started back in the 1980s to really meet those key important national security needs, national technology needs that can benefit all of us. They also were designed to really help stimulate the economy by funneling some of the extramural money that these agencies have specifically to small businesses. Because otherwise, it's likely that a lot of the large businesses, Lockheed Martin, many of the large contractors were going to eat up all of the money for R&D because the agencies knew them. So that was really one of the purposes, is to really make sure that we're involving the small businesses in addressing the innovation needs of our nation. With SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, the focus is on that technology development by the business. They're really driving it, and they can subcontract. They may want some help from a university. They may want help from one of the professors to consult on the side, maybe outside of the university, maybe within the university. They may want some help from a prime contractor, a very large company. They can subcontract part of an award. And for phase 1, on an SBIR, remember, the business is always the applicant, but they could subcontract a third of their total contract value to another company or companies. With STTR, the focus is really to help leverage that technology transfer between the university or a research institution, a federal funded lab, to take that technology, get it out of the researcher's hands, and get it over into the hands of a small business with people who can actually take that and commercialize it. But often that tech transfer is because the company is, or the technology is still in very early stage. It still needs some more R&D. So you may find that you have the business applicant, again, business applicant, but they'll partner on an STTR if you're working with one of those larger organizations, Department of Defense, NASA, NSF, Energy, one other that and NIH, right? So those agencies participate in the STTR. That allows you to subcontract much more of the contract value to a third party, to the research institution, for example, because perhaps the principal investigator or the real guts of the knowledge is at the university. Maybe the guts of the tool set is currently at the university. You need to figure out some type of allocation where you can leverage the expertise as well as some of the equipment that the university has to offer. So with an STTR, the applicant has to drive, 40% of the contract value does have to be work that's completed by the applicant, the business, but 30 or up to 60% could be subcontracted to the university. At least 30% has to be. But often this model is ideal for those organizations or those opportunities, those proposals where a significant amount of the work has to be done by the research team at the university. One exception I want to make sure, because I am going to talk a little bit about NSF here today. NSF does not allow STTRs to, the principal investigator to be employed by the university on an STTR. They want the PI, they want the person driving the research to be employed by the small business. And when I say that, this is always for the term of an award. So you can always keep that in mind. If that's not the case in your situation right now, you can consider for the duration of an award, can I make that jump from my FTE at my university over to take a sabbatical perhaps to be an employee of the company? You'll have to consider that. And this is going to be another point where I'm going to talk to your local tech transfer office about the terms that are appropriate. Talk to your local, your university's compliance office to talk about the types of allocation of rights and what will make sense for you if you're going to participate in a small business innovation research or small business technology transfer venture. Okay, I'm going to not play this right now. I will make sure that Hallie has the link for this. Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR.gov, is a brilliant resource for all of you. The Small Business Innovation Research website, SBIR.gov, has also a whole host of different tutorials. One of these tutorials is which one is right for me? Which should you be thinking about, SBIR or STTR? Yeah, I'm not sure. Your local support organization can help you explore different options for you. Your university, how you want to run your business. Do you want to stay with the university? Do you want to jump ship and go start your spin out? Those are a lot of things that you want to consider in deciding which may be the best type of funding source for you, or vehicle, I should say. I'm going to go back here. Remember, I said all of these agencies may focus on health, not just NIH, not just Health and Human Services, but National Science Foundation. Energy's had topics that are related to health. Department of Transportation has had topics that are related to health. But the two probably most prevalent are the Department of Defense. They have a significant number of biomedical research topics when they release their solicitations. Solicitation is a term generally used for funding opportunity announcements. NIH uses program announcement or public health service types of wording, but in general, we'll use the term solicitation to refer to these funding opportunities among these different agencies. I'm going to take a minute here too. I mentioned maybe contracts sometimes, grants, and a lot of people, especially when you're thinking about basic research, you think it's just a grant. They're going to give me some money to do some research. Well, in SBIR and STTR, those have very, very, very specific meanings, and it's important enough to address it here. A grant is from a granting agency like NIH, and I'll give you some exceptions to that too, where they really want an investigator to pitch them an idea. The agency, say, for example, National Cancer Institute, may want to see advancements in nanotechnology treatments for cancer therapeutics. Pretty general, could be pretty broad, but that's a research goal that they have. If you have some type of technology that can address that, you've found a way to leverage nanotechnology in terms of improving cancer treatments, you may want to submit a proposal for a very specific project to them. They're not going to tell you what they want done. They just want to see that, give them an idea. They'd like to see you improve cancer treatments. And so they may consider your proposal. In the case of a grant or a contracting agency, they have a very, very specific need in general. We'll talk about that too. At NASA, for example, they want a very small satellite that is radiation hardened, because when they send that satellite out to space, it's going to be bombarded by huge amounts of radiation. They want the components inside that satellite to work and accomplish some specific need that NASA wants for their missions. They're mission driven. Similarly for Department of Defense, they're going to have typically a very specific need, and they want you to solve the problem. Don't tell them what their problem is, just give them a solution to it. So that's going to be two different options there. Contracting agencies typically will buy that product from you if you play your cards right, if you produce something that's right, and then you continue to sell and develop a business to sell into that agency. NASA, Department of Defense, for example, the granting agencies like USDA or Energy or NSF or NIH typically are not going to buy your product that you develop, but they really want to see advancements for society's benefit. But they want you to be successful commercially, because that's going to be the best way to advance that societal benefit, to spread that benefit, is by creating something people will buy so that you can be sustainable and continue to build those products. NIH and Health and Human Services do have things that they call contracts. And the difference with their contracts is really they're bringing up specific problems and specific solution requests because they're not seeing enough investigator pitched ideas that will address that specific need. So sometimes NIH and Health and Human Services will issue what they call contracts, but that's really because they have a really specific goal in mind for the project. So I hope that that helps clarify a little bit. When I talk about contracts and grants, they are different depending on the agency that you're working with, and they're not the same. I mentioned SBIR.gov. I'm just doing a screenshot right now. I know, Hallie, I said I might go out. I probably will still go out because I want to share a couple of announcements for people. But the SBIR.gov has ways for you to look for different funding opportunities generally. It also can help you look and search for people who have received awards in the past. You can sort, if you look at this just screenshot, you could do a keyword search on surgical or sponge, or quote, surgical sponge, for example, or serum, for example. You can do some keyword search and look at all of the potential awards that have previously been made. And what's helpful with that, like, why would you say, well, why do I care whether or not someone else has been funded for this research? Two things, probably more. One, you'll see if the agency and which agencies have funded similar types of research. Two, you'll also see other companies that are playing in your field that you may not have been aware of. Those companies could be competitors of yours. They could also be potential partners of yours as well. So there's a lot of benefits to taking a look at seeing what types of things have been funded in the past. And this is one source of information. You can sort by years, which agencies, and a lot of different things. And again, your local support organization can kind of go into more detail. If you haven't played around with this a little bit more, it's worth exploring. SBIR.gov. The funding, you'll see up here the tab. And again, this is just a screenshot, so I'm not taking it live right now. Funding, they will show you upcoming and past and future, current, and past topics, meaning funding opportunities from the different agencies. And I think that that's okay. It's worth doing. I do like and typically refer my clients to look specifically at an individual agency's SBIR website. And I will jump out to take a look at those in just a second. And I mentioned that before I leave this slide, I wanted to make sure I point out the tutorials, like the one that I brought up, the screenshot of comparing SBIR to STTR. There are so many different tutorials that are easy, 15-minute chunks of time. You can watch them on your lunch break and really learn a lot more about the different aspects of the SBIR, how to prepare a proposal preparation schedule, how to build a team. What do you look for when you're building a team? What are some of the just overviews of the different agencies from a high level? Take a look at those SBIR tutorials. And here's some recommendations that I'm always advising people to do, and I advise you as well. If you have a technology and you're thinking about, one, seed funding, you would like to get some additional funding to actually get that to a marketable product. You're interested in yourself forming a small business or partnering with a small business to see your technology developed and brought out to the world, but you want to stay in your university FTE. There's a lot of things that you can start with. As we mentioned, take a look at SBIR.gov. This is going to give you award list, tutorials, a lot of information, some FAQs about the SBIR program. You can also find there's a locator in there as well. You can find your local SBIR support organizations regardless of which state that you're in. And then also go to the agency's SBIR site. And you can typically find this by typing SBIR and NIH, or SBIR and DoD, or Air Force, etc. You may, and I'm not trying to just push you off to Google, but that's typically the easiest way to find the agency's SBIR site. And they are very different because they are very different agencies. Even though that's under the SBIR program, they each run them, and they each have some very specific ways that they want to manage the money, proposal process, the frequency of proposals that they'll accept. But what will be really helpful for you is that they're going to talk about their specific rules. They're going to tell you what types of things they want to fund. They're also going to tell you more about their own specific review process. NIH has a panel review, study sections to review your proposals. They're going to bring in team members, subject matter experts that are close to the area that your technology is, commercial business experts to really analyze, does this person who's submitting this proposal understand what it's going to take to get this to market? Things like that. They're going to have a review panel, and they'll give you their joint feedback. Department of Defense, for example, they're going to have a few people, maybe. They're going to typically have a technical point of contact that knows what their requirement is and is going to review those proposals, probably seek some advice, but typically you're going to have that person make a decision about whether or not to go forward and fund your specific proposal. So very, very different processes. I also encourage everybody to, once you've narrowed down a specific agency that you think would be a good agency to submit a proposal to, because your technology is in line with generally what they're trying to do, take a look at their research strategies. National Cancer Institutes will publish what the types of things that they're going to fund, what their research objectives are. And so you want to make sure that you're absorbing that information. And when you prepare your proposal, remember I talked about your first customer? Your first customer is that agency. You're asking them to give you money. So you need to sell them on why it's important that they fund your research. Not just that it's going to have great societal impact or you're going to build a cool company out of it, but that it's going to advance their interest in advancing a certain type of research area. So make sure that you talk about that in your proposal as well. And another things to think about, I wanted to point out a couple of areas specific to technology transfer. Think outside of the box. Make sure you're finding those team members that are really going to bolster your team, bring new ideas to how you approach solving the problems that you think you have. Here's an example from National Cancer Institute, NCI. They have a teaming app that will help you partner with other research institutions. You can have more than one research institution on an STTR or an SBIR too, as long as you're within the types of funding limits. But find those other people that you may not know now that can actually really help you strengthen your team. And here's an example of partnering. So if you're a business right now, this might be a great way for you to find other research institutions that are doing some work in cancer research. You might want to leverage their expertise to build or expand your own business. Or you may be on the research institution side, you want to stay there, but you want to make sure that people are thinking about your research as a commercial potential. So you want to find that commercial market or business to market your technology. This is not a shameless plug, but I do want to let people know I do work for Montana State University's TechLink Center. I am focused on SBIR outreach, but TechLink also is the national partnership intermediary for Department of Defense and Veterans Administration technologies. So this is technology that's been developed in a DoD lab or a Veterans Administration lab, and they are not in the market of commercializing their technologies. They've developed something, they've patented something, but now they need to find a commercial partner that can take that technology, bring it to market, productize it so that it, one, can go back to hopefully benefit the warfighter, benefit people who are in the armed forces or who have returned home from defending our country, things like that, but also even commercial markets in general. Remember I talked about LASIK and that our smartphones, those are DoD technologies originally that now have broad commercial civilian applications. So this is one another source of technology transfer. And again, remember I've talked about health-related technologies. I'm working with a client who licensed through TechLink a biomedical technology that was developed out of the Department of Defense. And now she's taking that technology and forming her early stage business to bring that to market. So this is not just warheads and bombs. It is true medical advancements to help, and not just the warfighter, but society in general. So you may take a look at that. Again, I say think outside the box because I don't think many of you may have thought, oh, let me look at defense technologies for health-related things. Now tactics. These are things, and I am gonna gloss over them now because this is I wanted to give you an introduction to what the SBIR program is all about. If this is something that you want to proceed with, you're going to have partners that are going to help you with, okay, I want to take funding from the federal government. In order to do that, you have to register in a few different places. Depends on the agency. All of them require that you register with the System for Award Management. Your local PTAC or Procurement Technical Assistance Center can certainly help you to jump through some of the hoops in this. Again, remember, the small business has to be the applicant. So if you're currently on the university side and you want to stay there, this is where you're bringing in your team members from your community, your business partner. Another that I mentioned, these are proposals, right? This is no slight thing to prepare a competitive small business innovation research or STTR proposal, small business technology transfer. They're going to take 100 hours, really from start to finish, combined effort. And I recommend that you put together a proposal preparation type of schedule. I've put together something for our clients. It's no more than a spreadsheet. It's something that you can do on your own. Do whatever makes the most sense for you. The SBIR tutorials has a great tutorial on preparing a proposal preparation schedule as well. But you can use these as just a task list. You can use this to assign specific members of your team to own a certain component of the proposal development and when it should be completed by. And then you can assess where is everything so that when it comes to submitting the proposal, you actually have your proposal together, prepared, ready to go a week in advance. Does that always happen? No, but you better to have a very, very, very strong proposal a week in advance so that you can tweak some of the edits, any changes. If you send it to a reviewer to review it, they can get you feedback in plenty of time for you to incorporate the recommended changes so that you can submit everything through the systems that your specific agency requires. So a little bit of a trick for you, not really a trick, just do it. Prepare your proposal preparation schedule, however you want to do this. And I wanted to share with you, this is where I'm going to go ahead and turn on my screen share. I'm going to come over here to share. So you should now see, hopefully, let me make sure that you are. There we go, you are. Here's the SBIR.gov website I mentioned. I'm going to toggle over to the tutorials here. I'm not toggling here because I was hitting the wrong button. Tutorials is running a little bit slow right now. But this gives you a good example of some of the areas, the courses that they are. I'm getting some delay here. It's not loading everything right now. So I'm going to go over to this. SBIR.gov tutorials, definitely something that I recommend that all of you visit. And I wanted to give you some news about some events that I think you all should consider attending, either with perhaps some financial assistance from your local organization, if they have it available, or just on your own. Coming up in April, in Las Vegas, the National Institutes of Health will have their 21st annual Small Business Program Conference. This is the website for that. Hallie, I'll make sure I get it to you so you can send it off as a follow-on to everybody. But this April, the end of April, this here, so any of you in the Western states, I think this would be a really great opportunity for you to, one, learn much more about the NIH, SBIR, and STTR programs, and then also have an opportunity to talk with many of the program managers that participate in the SBIR program. Talk about the funding, talk about your ideas. And if you happen to go to someone in NCI and maybe your application, your technology is more appropriate for National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Disease, I don't know why it would be, but perhaps they're great people. They're really nice. They'll say, hey, let me introduce you to Natalia or so-and-so, someone else, so that you can actually make sure that you're getting the advice from the NIH program managers to really explore the seed funding and then successfully submit. Another aspect that I wanted, Tim, to go ahead and go back, I think, if I stop screen sharing. No, it didn't put the slides back up. Do you have those slides back up at all? Maybe not. There we go. Thank you, Hallie. I didn't see those there. Another thing that I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of, thank you guys for, I'm stammering a little bit now. One, for those of you in the Western states, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah will be hosts to the SBIR Road Tour this August. It's going to kick off in Bozeman, my hometown here, on August 10th. That's going to be another opportunity for you. If you're in the area, certainly come to Bozeman or Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah. Look at those locations for the SBIR Road Tour. Again, on sbir.gov, you can find a link to that, and I can share it with Hallie as well. I don't know, I didn't have it on this slide. But you'll have the opportunity to talk with SBIR program directors from Department of Defense, from NASA, from National Science Foundation, USDA, and other agencies, in addition to the National Institutes of Health. And then NSF funding for startups and small businesses, specifically focusing on biomedical and digital health technologies. They have a webinar coming up this Monday. I would suggest that you take a look at this. If this is an area that you're interested in and that your technology fits in, take a look at what NSF has to offer. NSF has just recently announced, typically they didn't touch pharmaceuticals. They do now. They've opened up a topic area for early stage pharmaceutical research as well. They have done biomedical devices and digital health for a while. No clinical trials are allowed with NSF. Clinical trials are something that's allowed with National Institutes of Health. So those, again, a few different differences within the agencies here. But I recommend that you take advantage of those these upcoming seminars as well. And that was it. That's it. That's it from me. Thank you. Here's my contact information. Certainly was on the announcement as well. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot me a note. Happy to answer a question wherever you are. And then I'll certainly make sure that you're introduced with my counterparts, my colleagues in the states that you are residing in. And if there are any questions, I'll let Hallie, you can read them off to me following up.
Great, thank you, Ann. So we'll start with our two locations that are broadcasting the webinar at their campus. So University of New Mexico, do you have any questions there?
No questions at this time, but we wanted to thank you, Ann. That was a great presentation. And I just wanted to remind everyone in the room and online that these are archived and you'll be able to access all the information. So once again, thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Great, and any questions at University of Montana?
Yeah, I have one. You mentioned that there's IP and data protection for 20 years. How does that work? Is that automatic, or how does that work?
Yeah, so how that works, you're going to, within your proposals, you actually want to disclose, you want to track and record any inventions that result out of that work. So inventions stay with the inventor, right? With the SBIR data rights, you will have published, you will have recorded the inventions that result out of that. But they really were modeling that after, and that's relatively new, this 20 years. It used to be 3 to 5 years perhaps, but they wanted to mimic what a U.S. patent would allow, which is about up to 20 years. So that's involved with, as you are conducting your work, that you're recording your inventions appropriately. Does that answer?
Does that require a provisional patent or a real patent?
No, it does not. Yeah, it's your data rights and IP protection. It's not quite the same as a patent. No, just the data that results from that funding, the research that was paid for by that funding. If it's outside of that funding, it's not. There's no data requirements that they need to be doing. That's your own responsibility to protect your own inventions. But they're talking about those inventions that are funded by the government. Under that, you have a certain amount of protections on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That you're also alluding to data rights, small business innovation research data rights. And that is a certain amount of protections that are available. Again, there's some tutorials in that on SBIR.gov. Your local support agencies can talk a little bit more about that. Everything that the government funds in terms of research, they have a royalty-free right to use. They want you to be their supplier, though. If you develop something very cool, they want it. They want you to produce it. If your company just can't cut it, you fail, you go out of business, they can take that, they can use that technology and ask Lockheed Martin, for example. It doesn't happen. It's not, if you're in business, that has never happened where a government has stolen technologies to give it to somebody else. But it is a protection that the government has, that if they're funding research, that if the company no longer produces it or doesn't produce it, they have a right to proceed with that. And that's, again, high-level overview of that.
So is there an advantage to having a provisional patent in addition to this, or is this sufficient, you think, for somebody who's got an idea that might be patented or not?
You know what, I am going to say that is going to be I want to be very careful about that. I don't know. I would say you want to talk to your own tech transfer office, your legal team that's in your university. If this is within a university, you also want to talk with an appropriate IP attorney that your business can talk to about what are the advantages of patenting this technology. Because in the marketplace, there is certainly different advantages to trade secrets versus patents. I would not consider this a replacement. I'm saying that it mimics patents from an IP protection, but it's not the same as from a commercial standpoint. You want to still protect your whatever you're putting out into the commercial market. And I will say, talk to your favorite IP attorney about that, who is familiar with SBIR. And there are a couple in Montana. We can talk about that later.
Yes, there are. Yes. Thank you.
Any more questions? No more questions here. Thanks, Anne.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Any questions online? You can send them through chat now. If not, feel free. Anna's put her contact information here, so you can feel free to reach out to her as well. All right, thank you, Anne, for a great presentation.
All right, appreciate your time. Have a great afternoon, guys.